Hi YouTube, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to my 50th birthday retrospective. We're getting close to the end now, so for those of you who have been watching all of these, thank you. I appreciate it. If you are enjoying my series, please leave likes on the videos. Please leave comments. I am more than happy to answer questions and chit-chat with anyone who wants to talk more about any of the stuff that I'm rambling on about, and if you're not, then, well, oh well. It's fine. Anyway, so today I'm going to cover when I was 48. I turned 48 at the end of 2019, and then into 2020, and 2020 is a pretty infamous year at this point. Now, before the whole pandemic and the shutdowns and all of that stuff happened, the biggest thing that I did in that year was my legal name change. So 2018 is when I started my medical transition and going on testosterone. 2019 is when I went through all of the surgeries. Only one that was a gender affirming surgery, and the top surgery it's literally the only surgery that I really wanted for myself from a gender affirming standpoint. And this may be TMI, so warning, but I don't plan to have any bottom surgery. I mean, I had the hysterectomy, and that's as far as I'm going in that direction, for a number of reasons. But I don't have dysphoria in that part of my body, and I'm just like, I'm not dating, I have no interest in a partner, and so I literally don't care if anyone views me as male just because my dick is only the size of a thumb. But you know what? If that's your opinion, screw you. That's and we'll end it there. But the one thing I hadn't done yet was do a legal name change, and I didn't want, like, for my first name, I didn't want to go with anything radically different. I didn't have a major problem with my first name to begin with. I legally changed my first name back in 1995. Not for gender reasons. There's a whole video I could do on the reasons for that one, so I won't go into that here today. But my legal name when I was born, and I don't consider it a dead name. I know that is the common term among trans people and perfectly valid for everybody. I don't like the term myself. I don't like the word dead. It for myself. This is just regarding myself and my name. I don't like the word dead name, so I go with birth name. And so my birth name was Gabriella. The reason it was Gabriella is because that was my mom's name. Although slightly long and complicated, to sum it up, she immigrated to the United States in 1956. She was 9 years old. Her name was spelled with an E at the end, and somehow, I think during the immigration process, they switched it to an A, and my mom and her family just kind of went with it, and it stayed Gabriella, even though that wasn't what was on her birth certificate. Because I actually went to Germany and got a copy of her birth certificate in an effort to get dual citizenship with Germany, which that didn't work out, but I actually have a copy of her birth certificate, and her name was spelled Gabriele, which is sort of the German or the European spelling, and can be used for either boys or girls. It's a gender neutral spelling for the name. And so when I found, because I did not even know Gabriella was my name until I was 12, so I didn't really have a close connection with the name. The name I was called the name I was called for a long time with, and I have a couple family members who still use it sometimes because they forget. But I was called Gigi after the movie because it was my mom's favorite movie, and why she didn't name me that instead of Gabriella, because long complicated, whatever. But anyway, so I ended up with Gabriella, and when I found out that my mom's name had been spelled differently and it was a gender neutral name, I was like, oh, I want to change it. Now, it wasn't just my first name I wanted to change. I wanted to change my entire name. I'm not going to reveal what my full name was, but my middle name was supposed to be my grandmother's first name, but my mom ended up using her grandmother's, or my grandmother's mother's, or my great grandmother's first name. My grandmother's first name was a shortened version of her own mother's name. There's a whole long history of women in my family naming their children after themselves. It's a thing, apparently. So, but my great grandmother named my grandmother legally, because also have a birth certificate for her, a shortened version of her own name. So my great grandmother had a longer name. My grandmother had the shortened version of the name. But my mom, who was trying to name me after her own mother, gave me the middle name of her grandmother, of my great grandmother instead. But she also butchered it and it was a freakishly bad misspelling of the name. So I had I had the misspelled version of my mom's first name. I had a terribly misspelled version of my great grandmother's middle name as my middle name, and then my last name was, because my mom was married and divorced twice before she turned 20. That was a whole thing, and she kept her second husband's last name when she divorced him. It was a much shorter spelling, because my mom's maiden name, which I will not say, but it's a long Polish name, and it's actually a very uncommon Polish name. There's very few people with this last name in the world, and it's actually one of the reasons I will never utter it, because it's a great secret password thing. So yeah, you'll never find out. and I threaten you to even learn how to spell it. But so my mom kept that name because her second married name was a really short, easy to spell name, and so she kept that. And so I ended up with her second ex-husband's last name as my last name, even though I have absolutely no relation to them, because I was born 6 years after she divorced him, because she was 25 when I was born, and she was 19 when she divorced him. So, there's no way he was my dad. So I because of all that, I wanted to change my name back in '95, and I went with the gender neutral spelling of my mom's first name instead. So I just tweaked it, because it was the name that my grandmother gave her daughter, and so it meant something to my grandmother, and so it meant something to me in that respect. And at the time, I didn't really think about it too hard, but I do remember really liking the gender neutrality of the name, even though in the United States it was seen as leaning more feminine because it had a vowel at the end instead of a consonant. And so most people just saw the name and just knew it was a girl's name. But I always saw it as gender neutral. And I actually know there was actually one of my coworkers in the European branch of the company I used to work for that had the exact same name as me, but he was a total guy. I mean, male pattern baldness, the whole, he was a dude. and we both had the same name, and so which tickled me pink. I loved the fact that there was another man out there that had the same name as I did. So that was kind of cool, and so that's one of the reasons I changed my name to that in the first place. But and I was actually going to keep that spelling of my first name, but because I'm in the United States and because so many people see it as a girl's name, I was and it was leading towards kind of a misgendering situation with me, and so it bugged me enough that I'm like, okay, I need to change the spelling of the first name. And when I got married, I kept the first name. I actually dropped my middle name entirely, because when I changed my name in '95, I changed my middle name as well. I changed my middle name to my grandmother's middle name, and then I also changed my last name. I got rid of the ex-husband's name and got or my mom's ex-husband's name, just to be clear. And I didn't want to go with my mom's maiden name, with my grandfather's name, because, again, long, complicated Polish spelling. I was like, no, don't want that. And so I went back a generation and went with my grandmother's maiden name instead, which it was a nice, easy to spell German last name. And so that's what I went with in '95. And then when I got married, I wanted to hyphenate my name. And so I dropped the middle name because it was the name was getting too long at that point. So I dropped the middle name entirely with that legal name change and just hyphenated with my husband's. And mainly because, okay, I wanted my husband's name in there because there are situations where you try to present yourself as a spouse, and they look at the last names and, well, you have different last names, and then it causes issues. So I'm like, okay, I need to have his last name on mine. But my consulting business that I was running had my name as part of the name of the business, and so I was like, well, I can't drop that, because all of a sudden, my last name doesn't match the company last name, and so how can I be the founder of the company and all that stuff? So I was like, let's just hyphenate and just make it easier. So then fast forward to 2020, and obviously I wanted to, I wanted to masculinize my name. And actually, the biggest reason I wanted to change my name actually had nothing to do with the gender thing, other than to stop the misgendering with the first name by literally dropping a letter off the end of it. So I went from people seeing it as Gabrielle and now saying Gabriel. It's such a subtle thing, but it makes a difference. And then I also took my dad's first name as my middle name, and then for the last name, I decided, well, I still really liked, I didn't want to lose my husband's name, and I didn't want to lose my grandmother's name, but the long hyphenated thing, now that my husband was gone and everything, and I also shut down my business, I was like, okay, I was getting sick and tired of the long last name, and so I decided to I forget, there's a term for this, portmanteau, whatever, where you take two names and you take bits of it, kind of like when you do romantic ships and stuff, romantic relationships from fictional stories. Like if you're a Supernatural fan, you have Dean Winchester and you have Castiel, and you stick Dean and Castiel together and you end up with Destiel, so that kind of a thing. So I did that with the two last names. I took the first three letters of my husband's last name and put that at the beginning, and the first three letters of my grandmother's maiden name and put that at the end, and stuck them together. And that's my last name now. And it's easier to spell. It's not necessarily easier to pronounce, because I pronounce it. I don't necessarily pronounce it exactly how it's spelled, although it works, so it's a thing. But yeah, so I did that I filed all the paperwork in, because I was working on all the paperwork through the end of 2018 or 2019, and then in the beginning of 2020, I finally, by February, filed all the paperwork. And one of the great things, actually, I waited till 2020 on purpose, because we have a law in Colorado now, it's called Jude's Law, that passed and went into law January 1st of 2020, where anybody who's either a victim of domestic abuse or someone who is doing a gender change, and therefore a legal name change due to their gender, in either of those cases, when doing a legal name change, you don't have to publish publicly that you're doing this. That's right now for pretty much almost every state in the United States. If you legally change your name, you have to, for 6 months or something, or maybe 3 months, every state's a little different, you have to publish your intent of name change, and people can look that up. It's supposed to be a means for, like, if you're trying to evade debt or whatever, that debtors can be aware that you're doing this so that they can come after you and under your new name as well. And there's a whole legal reason behind it. But in Colorado now, to if you're a victim of domestic abuse, so that your abuser cannot locate you under your new name, those folks don't have to publish publicly that they're legally name changing. And then also for those of us who are trans, because in some cases it could be dangerous for people to know that this person's name legally changed, and so in either case, there's no public publication of it, and so I did that. I used my gender change as the reason, so I didn't have to go through that whole process. The only big thing was I had to get fingerprints, which are filed with both the FBI and the CBI, which is the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, and they do a background check and make sure that you don't have any massive criminal history or any crimes that your fingerprints might implicate you for that you were previously not caught for. They don't want you to change your name if you're out there committing crimes, which that makes sense. And I didn't think that my fingerprints had been found anywhere that they shouldn't have been. So I went through with that process. That got all cleared up and approved. Once that came through, then I was able to file all the paperwork with the courts. And in Colorado, you can't if the judge has questions and wants to talk to you, they will set up a court date for you to talk to you. That's what happened to me in 1995 when I had the first legal name changes. I did have to appear in court, and I was able to use university legal services to do the legal name change, so I had a lawyer present and everything. This time around, I did not need a lawyer. I did all the paperwork myself, and they didn't even ask me to go to court. The judge just looked at the paperwork and approved it, and I was on my way. So 2 weeks later, I had my legal name change. And the first thing I did, because this was starting to get, the whole pandemic thing was starting to, people were talking, it was starting to get noticed and everything, and people were talking about it in the news. Shutdowns hadn't quite happened yet, but they were talking about it. And so I was early March because I filed the paperwork in February. Early March was when everything came through. It was right at the end of February, and I think I went in the next week and picked up the certified copy and ran over to the Social Security office and filed the paperwork there, because you have to get into the Social Security database with the legal name change and your gender change, which required a letter from my endocrinologist. And you file all that with Social Security, and once that's in the database, then you can change your driver's license and your passport and everything else. But those two steps, at least the way it works in Colorado, you have to have that first. So you have to have the legal name change done first, then you have to file it with Social Security, and then I think after 24 hours, the database is updated, and then the Colorado DMV will, you still bring the paperwork and everything, but as long as you're in the Social Security database, then they'll go ahead and issue a new driver's license, and then once you have the driver's license, then from there you use that to change your name everywhere else with your bank and all that stuff. And so having that paperwork finished before the shutdowns was great, because then I was able to do everything online and just send everyone copies of here's my new driver's license, here's the name change, here's the you look up the Social Security database and everything, and so that was a big part of 2020, was just going through and getting my name changed everywhere. The weirdest one was changing the name on my house. So I own this house. When my husband passed away, I sold his income property that he had, and I paid off the mortgage. So I own this house. I don't have to worry about losing the roof over my head, because other than property taxes, which thankfully Colorado is lower than other states, I should be able to maintain keeping this house. But in order to change the name on the house, you can't just do a legal name change. You literally have to sell the house to yourself. It was the weirdest ass thing. where it's called a quick claim form, and it's basically saying, you know, here's my old name, and I'm selling this property for $1 to my new name. And that's if you look it up, if you look up the public property, and that's actually, you know, on one hand it's weird, but the other hand it actually protects privacy, because you don't know it's a legal name change that's happening. It's a quick claim form where we're in a property exchange happening, but it could be done for any number of reasons, and it could be a private transaction where you don't want to disclose the amount of money that is exchanging hands with the there's a bunch of reasons that you can do the quick claim forms, and it doesn't have to do with a name change. And so people just look it up and they can see like old name and new name and the quick claim, but they have no idea. And so it does protect privacy in that way, which is kind of cool. But I had to laugh because I had to pay myself $1. It was, yeah, that was hilarious to me. Anyway, just a quick other couple notes. One thing that happened in 2020 is I adopted a new dog. I actually did not mention this in yesterday's video, but in 2019 is also when I lost my dog Joey to cancer. And I think I have a whole video on that. If I don't, maybe I'll make one in the future. But he ended up with an osteosarcoma in his head, and went through chemotherapy and radiation, and I managed to have him for a whole year pain-free before it finally got really too bad, and he had to be put down. I did an in-home euthanasia for him, and everything, so that his sister was there. She could see what was happening to him, and I had some friends of mine who came over, which was nice. But 6 months after losing him, I was ready to get another dog, and I wanted Lexi to have a companion of some sort, and I just wanted to have another dog. I like having two dogs, but this time I decided to go for a smaller dog. I did not want, because Joey was like 55 pounds, so medium size, and Lexi tops at around 45 pounds. Both, I mean, they're litter mates, so they were both mutts, basically. I did a DNA test on Lexi, and she's got like 20 breeds in her. she is about as mutted as a mutt can get. And so I went and looked through. There's a online website, petfinder.com, that works with rescues and stuff. And so found a dog that was around the size and type of breed. One thing I was trying to avoid, because I wanted a smaller dog, but I didn't want a Chihuahua mix. And I ended up with a 60% Chihuahua mix anyway, because the rescue misrepresented the dog on the website. And I think they did it on purpose, because people tend to avoid Chihuahuas. I was personally trying to avoid a Chihuahua, and he had enough other features with his mix that he didn't look exactly like a Chihuahua in the photos. Although once I got him home, I was like, that's a Chihuahua. And then I did his DNA test, and yes, he is. Thank goodness he does not have the Chihuahua personality. I mean, he gets the shiver shakes a little bit with his body and stuff when he gets really excited and nervous, but not too badly. And he doesn't yip or bark very often. I mean, once in a while when we've got a package delivery, that kind of thing. But he's really quiet. He doesn't bite. He's never nipped at anybody that I've ever seen. I mean, he has an oral fixation where he likes to play bite you when he's playing, but you just like that kind of thing. But he never like aggressively bites. So I got lucky with that. So he's got a really sweet, adorable personality and everything. He's mixed with Sheltie and Border Collie. So he's also a bit smarter than I would have expected as well, and he's just turned into just a really great little dog. So I'm glad I got him, despite the fact that he was misrepresented with his breed mix and stuff. But anyway, so yes, I adopted a cute little dog in 2020, and you know, obviously with COVID hit, one of the things you would think of is like, oh, you know, you're stuck at home, which I'm at home all the time anyway. So my life did not change much with COVID. Other than I just went out a little less than I used to, and not that I went out very often at all. I mean, the one big change is I didn't go out for trivia pub quizzes. I was doing that once a week with my friends, and we had to stop doing that. So that's one thing that has changed in my life. But other than that, the only thing I go out for are groceries and doctor visits. Otherwise, I just stay at home. I take the dogs for a walk, and that's about it. I mean, I like being at home. I'm a homebody. I'm a hermit, and so this is my comfortable, my safe space, and I just don't go out very much, and so yeah, that didn't change much. No, the last two videos I talked about publishing my first two novels, and I was planning on publishing my third novel in 2020, and that didn't happen. I had a really kinky story that I was working on. I wrote most of it during NaNoWriMo 2019, and then I was trying to finish it up in the rest of 2020, and I struggled with it at one point. I kind of hit a wall, and the big thing with the wall that I hit coincided with the whole Black Lives Matter movement. Now, I did not have any black characters in my book. If I did, I would have been using sensitivity readers for them. But so far, I haven't wanted to kind of broach that. That being said, in the sci-fi novel that I wrote way back in 2016, which I'm still working on, the human main character is dark-skinned, but it's also set 10,000 years in the future, and he was born on another planet. So culturally, I'm able to kind of run with it in a way that I couldn't with a more contemporary story, because culturally he's just human. He happens to have dark skin. But he does not, he is of the human faction on this planet, and so I'm able to kind of make up how they are culturally and everything else, and as long as I'm kind of consistent with their culture throughout the story and things. And some of the humans are kind of nasty, but most of them are pretty good. And my main character is a real stand-up guy. Trust me. But in general, especially for my contemporary stories, I've hesitated adding black characters, at least as my main characters. I have had people of other ethnic groups for my side characters, because I'm not writing from their point of view, their POV, just because I don't know. I want to be respectful of other cultures, and when I'm writing my main characters, I often I'm trying to picture being them as I'm writing them, and I don't know if I would be respectful enough writing an actual African American black character. That's not to say I won't try doing that as a challenge at some point in the future, but I also need to make sure that I get myself a couple of really good black beta readers for making sure that I am representing the character properly. It's actually one of the reasons why I actually hadn't tackled writing a trans character until that's the next video, because I hadn't transitioned. I wanted to get further along in my transition before even tackling that, because I wanted to have a better understanding of the journey and of being trans and of living as a trans person before writing a character of that background and stuff. So anyway, but none of the characters in the book I was working on in 2020 were black, but it was set in a universe where slavery is legalized, is still legal. In fact, and this was a big point that was made during Black Lives Matter, or or one, not a big point, but one of the many points, that basically the U.S. prison system is legalized slavery, where and it's disproportionately leaning towards throwing black people in American prisons, which is, there is no doubt that this is a problem, and there is no doubt that it is an injustice to the black community. And I'm not going to go political on this one, but so majority of prisoners are black, and they are used as cheap or free labor for making license plates and just all sorts of stuff. And that is the only part of it's slave labor, and it is the only legalized slavery in the United States. It's actually in the constitutional amendment that got rid of slavery, and I think that's one of the it's in there somewhere. And I had taken that concept and said, well, extrapolated it to, like, well, what if we lived in a universe where the legalized slavery was more blatant, where instead of even sending, like, only the worst offenders are actually sent into a prison, that the white collar criminals and the small time criminals and that kind of stuff, instead of sending them into a jail and sticking them in a jail cell, that they are actually auctioned off as slaves, including sex slaves and the whatnot. You can see where the problem is already with that book. I mean, it's a very high kink, dark kink kind of a scenario. And even though my character is white, and even though the person who ends up, purchasing him is white, as the Black Lives Matter movement gained momentum last year, I became less and less comfortable with the plot line of my own novel, to the point where I just couldn't keep writing it. Even though, I mean, like, the master character in the story is paying for the guy, for his slave, to get an education, so by the time he's finished, he's going to have a degree, and he's going to help him set up this advocacy program. I mean, there were all sorts of positive aspects I was throwing into it, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't think mainstream is really ready for a novel like this. I haven't deleted it or anything. I may actually throw it up as a fan fiction story and turn it into a fan fiction story, because fan fiction tends to be a little bit more forgiving for writing taboos of that nature. But I figured, this is a little too taboo for mainstream, so I just kind of scrapped that novel, and I started putting together. I have a whole lot of short stories that I've written over the years, and I decided to throw those together into a book. It still took me over a year to compile and edit those. That's actually one of my upcoming books this year coming out, is my short story collection. But when I threw that other book away, I'm like, stopped writing that other book, I was like, okay, let's do the short story thing until I can figure out another story to write. Because, so that's why I did not publish a third novel in 2020. And, okay, this video has gotten a little bit long again. Sorry. That name change thing took a bit of explaining, didn't it? So anyway, for anyone who is still watching, thank you for sticking with me. And I hope you've come back and watched the last two. So tomorrow we'll hit age 49, and it's the last year I've experienced. And then I'll wrap everything up with a final video after that. So stay tuned and take care.